Happiness? Serenity? What is that? Man, we're going to tell you. We're going to give you the tools here on No Regret Vets podcast. We want you to tune in every week to listen to the live interviews that are in-depth and raw with people that have been through similar situations with addiction, PTSD, all kinds of mental health. We want to build you back up so you can build the life you want. So like and subscribe to us on Facebook, Spotify, any of your social media platforms today, and let's get started with helping each other on No Regret Vets. Good afternoon, folks, and thank you for joining me here on the first episode of Vets Carrying No Regrets. We are sitting down today with my good friend Adam Gunther for the first interview of our program. We're going to be discussing his life events, things that he grew up doing, things he did throughout life, how he got here to this point today in full recovery. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm sitting here with Adam Gunther now.
I'm Gunther. I'm an alcoholic, an addict, and U.S. Army retired.
Yes, sir. We are both combat veterans, and we get along pretty good. We live in a house together and work with other recovering addicts. So, Adam, if you would go ahead, man, and just kind of tell me your story from, basically birth, and then we'll go through the rest of it together.
All right, well, I'm glad to be here, glad to be able to do this, especially share my story of hope. But we are going to correct the whole Adam thing. Please call me Gunther.
That's Gunther, folks.
So starting at birth, my parents were young, 19 and 21 when I was born. I'm a December baby, born in 88. I had a okay childhood up until my parents got divorced. I was about 5 when that happened, which is also around the same time I took my first drink. Actually, I was with my grandfather and my dad on a pontoon boat.
Wow, so you took your first drink at 5 years old.
Yeah, they wanted to stay out and fish all night, and of course I wanted to be one of the guys.
Right.
So I stayed with them, and they handed me my first Budweiser, I believe it was. And I think I had 2 that night, because I remember it was barely dark when I went to sleep, and then I woke up in the morning. And I don't even remember going to sleep, really.
Right. Be your first encounter with alcohol, really. But backtracking real quick, at that time, do you remember any feelings or how it made you feel with your parents' divorce and things like that?
No, not really. I was more confused. One day my dad's in the house, the next day he's not. Also at that time my mother had recently broke her neck in 4 places. So there was her going through her surgeries. My dad's not around a whole lot. I'm, being taken care of by my aunts, also my grandparents at the same time.
Right.
So I guess confusion. So moving forward, I didn't have like a really rough childhood. I did experience some trauma throughout my childhood. There was sexual abuse that took place, which I used to not want to talk about, but I feel like it is a big part of my story. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but...
No, and we wouldn't ask you to, and I definitely believe that, especially in males, it's a taboo almost thing to talk about, but needs to be addressed because the underlying issues that it creates in the future. But yeah, for sure.
And absolutely, it was a big stigma growing up. I felt, with that happening to me as a child, I grew up with a lot of, like, the confusion from just childhood in general, and then this happening and not knowing what was expected of me as, a man or a child, or even just, sex in general going into my, teen years. After that abuse, life kind of leveled out. I was about 8, 9 when it stopped. And, it was about the time my mom went back to school, and she got her nursing, or she was already a nurse, but she became a registered nurse from an LPN.
Okay.
I was raised, like I said, by a single mother. I don't know if I said that, but saying it now.
Right.
And life got pretty good, pretty decent after that. She was making a significant, amount more money, was able to provide better for me. And I say everything that happened in my childhood and being raised by a single mother, and I put that in my story, but none of that makes me an alcoholic.
Right. I got you.
What makes me an alcoholic is I fall into that 7% of the population that has an allergy to that drink. In other words, once I start, I cannot stop, nor will I stop.
And that's a great point. I'm glad you bring that up now. I think a lot of people not in a program or working steps or something like that have a little confusion on where that comes in and actually how that is a diagnosable disease today currently.
Absolutely. And throughout my drinking career, I blamed a lot of my drinking on my childhood. It was, oh, if you went through what I went through, you would drink too. And that carried me through most of my high school and later teen years of why I drank so much. Even at that time, people could tell that I already had a problem. Even I could tell I had a problem, but I wasn't willing to accept it yet.
Right, exactly. I think I fit in that category a little bit too from high school. But I definitely didn't realize it till later as we went. And so in high school, you were already drinking pretty heavily, lots of party and stuff like that. Were you able to function, make it through school? Were you flunking? How'd that look?
I functioned pretty well. I started, there was parties. Started definitely my freshman year, coming right out of 8th grade. Experimented with pot, which I fell in love with. Alcohol, obviously, fell in love with that. And that just became kind of like a weekend thing for me most of my high school career. There was times where I would drink during the week if we didn't have school or things like that. As far as my grades went, I did pretty well. Definitely didn't graduate top of my class, but I wasn't at the bottom either.
Right. So you're functioning alcoholic already in high school?
Yeah, absolutely. My senior year, it started to ramp up. I had a buddy who would pick me up from school. He was 21, I was 18, and he would pick me up. And he would always show up with Sparks. You remember those old energy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He would show up every day at 2:45 to pick me up from school and already have one for me and be like, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Priming already.
Yeah. And this went on my whole entire senior year. It was pretty much every day after school, he'd pick me up. We would hit back roads. And for anybody that's not from the Midwest, hitting a back road is where you just drive around on old roads and drink or smoke weed.
We did that on the Southeast, too, for sure. So if I pause the tape right now in your story, what would say your causes at this time were for drinking? In other words, was it to suppress feelings, or was this just more of a party, having fun type atmosphere thing, and we hadn't really moved into the emotional drinking?
On the outside, it was definitely partying. I enjoyed what alcohol did. I was very social when I drank. I was able to get along with a lot more people. I wasn't an angry drunk yet at this point.
Right.
There was a lot that I was masking, and I wasn't showing that side of the drinking yet.
Okay.
So internally, I was drinking because I was able to suppress my childhood feelings, and I wasn't able to deal with a lot of that. So this was my outlet. And then, too, it was a partying phase. So it was like both. It was an emotional reason why I drank, and also the facade of wanting to go out, have fun, party, and just get along with everybody.
I got you. Kind of puts you into the Gunther Superman element at the time in your head.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got you. All right, so we went through high school. Here you go along the journey of life here. What's next for Gunther?
Graduated high school, immediately went to college, figured out very quickly that it was not for me. Not because I couldn't achieve the assignments or anything like that. It was I wanted to work. I wanted to make money.
Right.
So did what a lot of guys in my area did, joined the Bricklayers Union and started working right away.
Pretty tough work.
Yes and no. I was young, so for me it wasn't really that tough. And I was decently physically fit. I mean, I was no jock in high school. I did like wrestling and things like that, but was never the most athletic person. But the work, I mean, it was difficult, but I made a lot of money, so I didn't care.
Right.
I still lived at home.
Yeah, and that's a big thing at that age too. You want to be financially on the ups and stuff like that. And just so you listeners know out there, the Adam Gunther I know today is a gym guru, works out like crazy, did a lot of body transformations, which I'm sure he'll go over as we go, but just wanted to throw that out there. A little respect for him and his gym habits. All right, so we're laying bricks.
Yeah, we're laying bricks, and
we've dropped out of college at this point.
Yes, I have dropped out of college at this point. Did bricklaying for about a year and a half, and we're coming into about mid-2008, and the housing market crash really took an effect in my area. So
absolutely.
Tons of people got laid off, and me being so new, I was laid off. So I rode that gravy train for a little bit of the unemployment, just kind of bummed around. I was still drinking really heavily at this time and really only smoking weed until I got a job at a strip club to mind. And no, I wasn't a stripper. I'm going to go ahead and clarify that now.
For the record.
Was security. That was my experience. That was my first experience with like really hard drugs. I'd done pills, pot, things like that, but hadn't dived into like coke or heroin or anything like that until I started working there.
Right, and I think for our generation, it especially coming from an addicted background for both of us, we're the first generation to, in a majority, really. I think unbeknownst to our parents, people like that, to really dive into the pill scene and things like that so deeply with the epidemic of pain pills and stuff, but it was as common as alcohol and marijuana. So when we say hard drugs to us, we're really talking about truly the hard stuff, because to me, pills were as available as pot or beer or liquor, and these were things that were pretty common then. So
yeah, that time was right at the tail end of the Oxycontin gravy train, when everybody was able just to walk in and be like, oh, I stubbed my toe and get a 90-day prescription.
Yeah. Need the yellow hydros.
Exactly. So, going back, just doing the pills and then smoking weed and still, like I said, drinking very heavily. I got the job at the strip club. I was around 19. And want to talk about the greatest job for a 19-year-old young man is working at a strip club. You get paid to throw drunk people out of the bar. Yeah. You get paid to drink. You get paid to do lines of blow. Right. And you get paid to watch women take their clothes off. Yeah,
I mean, that's like an extra $1,000 a day on top of your paycheck.
Exactly. I mean, I'm 19 years old, and I think I'm living the dream. But still, mind you, I'm living at home.
Right. That's the secret part you don't tell at the bar.
Right. So, I did that for about 6 months. Really enjoyed it. There are circumstances that led me not to working there anymore, and they had to do with a family member that got himself in trouble there, which then resulted in me getting out of there before I got hurt.
I guess shit trickles downhill.
Yes, and it was very quickly. I found myself not just doing the blow and things like that. I wasn't dealing it, but I was transporting it.
Like a mule.
Pretty much. And I knew once my family member got himself in the pickle he got into, that it was going to come down on me next. So I got out of there when I could.
Right.
And there were no ramifications, no repercussions. And then that's when, because it was never a matter of if I was going to join the service, it was a matter of when, and the win came. Okay. That was the win.
For sure.
And at that time, right after all that happened, I had just met my ex-wife too. Going through the transition of going into the Army, I'm in a new relationship with a girl. Life is finally going on the up. And it was April 2010, I left for basic training. And that's where I guess my adult life really started at that time, and I was 21. No, I was 21.
I got you. Yeah, so Iraq's coming down at this time. Afghanistan's, staying heated and continuing to heat up. So you're joining at a reinsurgent time, really.
Yeah, I had drill sergeants that were very much explaining that their tours in Iraq, and we had one drill sergeant that just came back from Afghanistan and just went through drill school, and he made it very clear that, like, you boys signed up at the right time. And
basically, you're going to be doing your job.
Exactly. That's exactly what he meant. And I went in as a combat engineer, and, they make the videos look so cool. Right. The great thing was I had an awesome recruiter. For the
record, that's rarely said.
Yeah, he told me from the get-go, he's like, man, it's going to suck. You're not going to like it. You're becoming a combat engineer. Everything you saw in that video is not true. You're going to just drive down roads and look for bombs.
Wow, that's my honest recruiter. That's uncanny.
Yes, very.
And so where did you go to basic training at? When did, so 2010, you're shipping off to boot. Where did you go?
I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, or as we like to call it, Fort Lost in the Woods. And that, just a side note, I had a funny story. While in basic training, I'm horrible at land nav. I'm like a lieutenant when it comes to land nav. And when we had to do our land nav course, we literally got lost in the woods. There was 4 of us. It was becoming dark. We finally found a road, and we're walking down it when the drill sergeant drove up in the LMTV, because everybody else was back, obviously, except for
Right.
us.
And then trying to use your main geographical features just to unfuck yourself.
Yeah, and that just wasn't going to happen. None of us knew what we were doing.
Right.
But so graduated basic training in August that year of 2010, and I went straight to Fort Bragg, home of the airborne. I was a leg, and I enjoyed it. My knees still work, to all you airborne paratroopers.
Keep jumping.
Did some pretty cool schools. I'm not going to dive too much into that because it goes into what I did on deployment, and anonymity is kind of a thing when it comes to certain things that I did while deployed. But did Fort Bragg, did some pretty cool schools, had a lot of things laid out on my feet. The first unit I was in was 264th Engineer Clearance Company, and at that time, that was the only designated route clearance company in the United States Army. From there, I went to the 57th Sapper Company, which was the only designated rough terrain unit in the Army. And while in the 57th Sapper Company, that's numbered units can deploy without the whole battalion going. Well, 264 got called to deploy, and they asked for volunteers. At this time, I hadn't deployed yet, and I wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Regular old slick sleeve.
Exactly. So the day that I volunteered, right after volunteering, I look at my phone, and I see a positive pregnancy test.
Okay, that's a game changer.
Cannot change your volunteer status. So I was going,
for sure.
And I just found out that same day that my now ex-wife was pregnant.
Under pressure.
Yes. So got home that day. I explained to her. We had our moment with the pregnancy. We enjoyed that moment. Called, the parents, did all that stuff, and then that night I finally had to tell her. I was like, "Hey, I'm leaving in like 3 months," and she's like, "What?"
Yeah, it kind of went over like a turd in a punch bowl.
Absolutely. And she's like, "What?" Or no, yeah. I was like, "Yeah, I'm leaving in 3 months." And she's leaving to go where? She just figured like another school or out to the field or something like that. And it was going to be a longer exercise. And I was like, "No, like
real long FTX, babe."
Yeah, I was like, I'm leaving for a while. And it hit her. It was, "Oh, you're going to deploy." I was like, "Yes."
So the internal relationship conflict kind of.
Surprisingly, she was incredibly supportive through all of it. When I left, it was June 2013, just days before her birthday, and she was at this time roughly 6 months pregnant, 5.5 months pregnant.
You're shipping out, leaving a new pregnant wife before her birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean.
And like I said, she she really was incredibly supportive.
No, yeah, for sure. That's awesome. That's very good. With all this going on right now, and this stage we're talking about, where's your drinking and use at? Obviously, basic training, you probably had a decent break from using. Yeah, but that's short lived.
During basic, obviously, I didn't drink. I was a good boy during that time. It was 15 weeks of OSUT, and there was no way I was going to screw myself up. About the worst thing that I did in basic training was I got caught with dip in my mouth, and I was walking down the hallway, and I had my canteen, and I was spitting in it, and the drill sergeant walked around the corner and said, "Private Gunther, you look awfully thirsty." I said, "No, I'm not." Needless to say, I drank that whole canteen, and I manned it up until my face turned a couple different shades, and he told me I could go ahead and go to the bathroom.
Yeah. That's
But that was about the worst thing I really did in basic.
OSIT training, if you're not military, OSIT is a one-station unit training, whereas you have split-up training where you go to your basic training, then school. We both went through OSIT, and that's where you do everything straight in a row, constantly under drill sergeant supervision, and as soon as you're done, you are combat deployable. Sorry for the interruption. Just wanted to get that out there. Little
it's
fun
nice
fact.
It's good to clarify. So after basic, I did pretty well. I guess if anybody's familiar with the Big Book, I was kind of like a Dr. Bob. This was one of those points in my life where I could hold my life together and not drink heavily.
Right.
The weekends I would, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the military, a lot of people that don't know it see it as this, upstanding heroic guys just constantly standing at attention or something, but it's definitely its own fraternal order of some sort, especially when it comes to the partying and the drug use and stuff. So
yes, very much. A lot of weekends of heavy intoxication. But again, I wouldn't get blackout drunk at this time.
Okay.
There was very few times I would, and I don't know if it was because I was subconsciously not drinking or if it was just because I was really career focused. I really loved the Army and I really loved what I was doing.
Yeah, so right now, your alcohol, whatever use, at that time, it's a light switch. It's turn it on for the weekend, turn it off for work.
Yes, okay. Very much so.
So we're in control with this.
And then deployment, about the first 3 months, I did pretty good. Seen some action. The first time I was actually hit by an IED was about a month after being over there, and I handled it pretty well. I was definitely concussed, but not delusionally concussed. I remember calling my mother and my ex-wife that night, and both of them already knew what had happened before I could even explain anything.
The rumor mill in the military.
Yes, they were asking if I was okay and all that, and I could hear the worry in both of their voices, and it's like, I'm absolutely fine. And that's really when war got real for me. I'd been in a couple firefights. There was some things that had happened, but being hit by an IED was a big eye-opener. I realized just how quickly...
instantaneous...
things change, yes. We're just driving down the road. Next thing you know, vehicles stopped and everything's dusty, cloudy, smoky. You're dazed. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah, very vulnerable chaos.
Yes.
A few seconds. It's seconds, but it seems like hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was the moment that things got real for me.
Right.
Fast forward a little bit. It's coming up on September of my deployment. I've been there for about 3 months. My ex-wife gives birth to our first daughter. And I remember the day pretty clearly, actually. We were running mission. And coming across the BFT was, hey, we got news for Gunther. And of course, I have access to the BFT. And I'm like, well, what news?
And a BFT is it's basically a very intelligent GPS system with a screen inside the vehicles. But also you can send messages coded or uncoded, and that's just pretty much standard now in all military vehicles. That's just how that works. But
so I'm asking what's going on, and radio silence on the BFT. Nobody will say anything. Nobody after that. That was it. The mission took about another 4.5, 5 hours of route clearance. We get to where we're going, and we get to this. It's a little bitty cop.
Combat operation post. Yeah, cops are a combat operation post. It's usually for small units that are solely dedicated to that region and area and operating at all times.
So we get there, and my sergeant comes up to me, and me and him, we didn't get along, but we didn't get along for the right reasons. He was incredibly hard on me. He smoked me nonstop. I was constantly doing push-ups and sit-ups for this guy or jumping jacks. But he did it, and I later realized this, and even at the time I knew it, he was just trying to make a better version of me, and he did a very good job. I would never tell him to his face, and if he ever hears this, he's going to know who I'm talking about.
Right, and I know from experience, it's in the moment, it's hard to see that. It's hard to see what you're going to become because all you know is you're getting your ass smoked.
So... he comes up to me and he starts reading off the phonetic alphabet, and he's actually spelling out my daughter's name, and I'm completely oblivious to it. Have no idea what he's trying to relay to me. And then finally he just snaps and he's like, says my daughter's name, and he's like, was born today at such and such, dumbass. And I was like, oh my goodness. And like this feeling of joy came. So I hadn't even seen her, met her, anything. The only thing at this point that I knew about my daughter was one, that I was having a girl. Right. And I had heard her heartbeat once during ultrasound with my ex-wife. So that's the extent of what I know of my daughter. But when I found out she was born, the amount of love that instantly I had for that child, right, while in the most chaotic place in the world, yeah, it was, I needed that day. Right. Earlier that day, there had been some firefights, some injuries, and this was just like that good news you kind of needed, right, and I finally had it.
Yeah, pretty rare over there to get such good news, and that's awesome. Even though you're away, like you're saying, man, your life literally changed. You'll never forget standing in that spot in a different country, and your life changed, forever.
So you're absolutely right. I mean, that I can still see like the images around me in my head of what, I mean, it was like a flash memory almost. Yeah. So my LT walks up to me and he's got the sat phone and, he's like, do you want to call your wife? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so I'm calling, and here in this, where she was at was in the St. Louis area. It was about 1 or 2 in the morning. And when I called, it was the front desk, and they were, I told them who I was. I would like to speak to my wife, and they were like, "Oh, sir, she's sleeping." And I was like, "You don't understand. I'm not going to be able to call again for a couple of days. I need to speak to her." And one of the nurses in the background, I don't know if they had me on speaker or what, but she's like, "Oh my God, is that the soldier?" And the lady that I was talking to was like, "Well, I don't know. He said his name is Gunther." And I could hear the lady in the background, "Oh my God, go get her, go get her!" And so they had to wheel my ex-wife down to the nurse's station so she could talk to me, and she explained to me about the birth and all that stuff. And as we were having this conversation, we actually started taking incoming mortars. Oh man! So I'm on a satellite phone, just found out my daughter's born. I'm talking to my ex-wife and diving underneath an RG-31 at this time because
being engaged, right?
And she's on the phone, and she could hear everything in the background. And she's, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I was like, I'm fine. Just give her a kiss for me. I love you. And I hung up the phone immediately. About 4 or 5 hours went by. I finally had internet access, and this was the first time I seen a picture of my daughter. It was roughly about 18 hours after she was born. And again, just the events of that entire day, and then knowing that my daughter was born, and then finally getting to see the picture of her was just incredible. Throughout the rest of my deployment, if we're going to talk about alcoholism, one of the things that we would do is we would have our wives send us alcohol.
Oh yeah, we'd have Listerine. I don't know how y'all did it, but we would do Listerine bottles.
Listerine bottles. They'd put the food coloring in it for us, and I mean, it looked legit. And
peanut butter. They'd carve out peanut butter and put some, some other things in there that weren't liquid.
Right. So after my daughter was born was the first time I took a drink in Afghanistan. And I again, it kept it very, very mild. I only took a shot here and there because I had a full bottle, and this is how bad my alcoholic brain was at the time. One, I still didn't think I had a problem because I had a handle on it. Mm-hmm. But then I'm also having conversations with myself of, you can only have like one shot right now. Otherwise, if you have 2 or 3, you're going to end up running that bottle out before the next one gets here.
Mentally micromanaging your drinking.
Yes.
And you're still in a heightened fight or flight stance then. I mean, especially being on a cop, your job as a sapper, there's not a dull moment. Whether you're engaged in a firefight or an ID, you're still on high alert this entire deployment. And I know that's how it was for me. So I think part of that may have played into your mental micromanaging of how much you're going to drink when, just because of that necessary survival mode of what might pop off.
Right. And I also did pretty well too. I never drank before like a mission or anything like that. But like you said, I mean, it's still heightened all the time.
Yeah, I can't say that.
So even though we would go on mission and we would come back, I would take, my 1 to 3 shots or, whatever I would have. I'm still putting myself at a higher risk and the guys around me because we're on this little small cop on a mountainside, and just right across the valley, we know are known Taliban that we engage with regularly. And if we don't, the ANA are.
Yeah. And as your local medic can tell you, even dehydration. So
yeah. So get through my deployment. Throughout deployment, I was hit a total of 6 times with an IED. I couldn't tell you how many firefights. Roughly 180 to 190 missions of route clearance. Also ran missions with Special Forces. Also ran missions with for support for private security elements. So I had a very eventful deployment, very fun in a lot of ways, and very active.
Right, man. So
yeah, it was very exciting deployment. Had a lot going on.
Basically, you got to do the cool shit people see on TV, the real shit. You were involved in the heavy side of carrying the load in the Army. Yes,
in a lot of ways. There a lot of times, when you see in the movies like people pinned down, been in those situations, kicking indoors, literally driving down the road and being blown up. The last IED blast I went through took my Buffalo completely down, which is a interrogation vehicle, and they're meant to take blasts. That's the one. I fractured my back in a few places. Didn't know it at the time. I knew I was just in a lot of pain. And I was right at the tail end of my deployment. And I wasn't going to, hey, I need to go home. And
yeah, don't want to go to Germany. Don't want to stay with your unit, that integrity there. So
exactly. So took that, on the chin, and there was about 4 or 5 weeks left. So we were doing left seat, right seat. And if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's new units coming in. You're just showing them the routes and what they're going to be doing. You don't even get out of the trucks during left seat, right seat most of the time.
Yeah, showing them hotbeds, different areas of intensity. So you're ripping with them, changing out, change of command.
So did that, and upon returning home, it was one of the greatest feelings in the world. I finally get to meet my daughter for the first time. At this time, she's 6 months old, and she had the coolest sign. Something my ex-wife did that I thought was pretty cool.
So she could write already.
Yeah, she was really advanced for her age. But it was a cool sign. It said, I've waited my entire life to meet you. And it's sitting right in front of the stroller, and I remember I walked right up. I almost bypassed my ex-wife, but I did stop to give her a hug and kiss, and then I immediately grabbed the baby, and I was crying like a little girl. I mean, really was.
Yeah, absolutely, unwarranted.
And while I'm crying, my daughter, who hasn't really been around men at all because she was with her mother the entire time, but also hadn't met me, and I'm coming off a plane from an 18-hour flight, hadn't showered probably like a day or two before that. So her first, experience with me is this smelly, deployed, mildly angry person already, and overly emotional. And and children feed off of that. And she immediately just starts screaming bloody murder. So I passed her off to my ex-wife, went home, and by that night we went to a restaurant. It was one of my favorites in Fayetteville. It's called Kickback Jack's, and immediately was drinking. And I remember the ride to the restaurant. She was going the speed limit. She was going 55 miles an hour, and I'm like holding on for dear life inside the car because I'm so used to going like 5 or 10 miles an hour.
Yeah, right.
So her doing 55, I feel like I'm on a rocket ship.
Right, and then also just situational awareness of the roads around you, other cars. It's a different world. I remember coming home from the deployment, and yes, that angst and anxiety of riding passenger in the car, not being in control is very different.
Right, and the decompress period was, we did left seat, right seat. We sat in Bagram for 2 days, sat in Manus for 2 days, and then we were home. So 4 days, 4 to 5 days before I met my daughter, I was in active combat. So there was no decompression. There was no, and I didn't know how to deal with any of this. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew what I had grown up with in the military. And at this point, anybody who knows anything about the military, they glorify drinking. And not only that, they say drink on it. Like if you're having a bad day, I'll go home and have a drink. And so that night I did. I drank, and this is when the blackouts really started again. Not that first night, but within the next week, I was already drinking heavy enough to...
So it was a quick escalation back to, or if not superseding previous drinking habits.
Very quick. And I went from, when I used to justify my drinking in my teen years to my childhood, to justifying my drinking because of my deployment and the things I had seen on that.
Right.
I always had an excuse to drink.
Always.
And again, I'll reiterate what I said earlier. What I did on deployment, what I seen, and what had happened to me on deployment does not make me an alcoholic. Right. It does, however, give me a grievance. It does, however, give me resentments. It gives me all the reasons of why we do like a 4th step and a 5th step.
But at the time, they're going unaddressed, and we've got an excuse, so, off to the races.
Exactly. So fast forward a little bit. I'm drinking incredibly heavy. I'm going through physical therapy for my back because at this time they find out what's wrong with it because I was just in so much pain. And on top of that, again, the Army, they just will throw pills at you. And that's what they did at that time. So I had to go through ASAP, Army Substance Abuse Program, for addiction. And that was my first round at really, attempting to get sober. And I really don't think I was trying to get sober from alcohol. It was really just the drugs because I was definitely overusing anything and everything I could get my hands on.
I know in my early recovery, looking at that, yes, I wanted to come off fentanyl and cocaine and things like that. But at that time, still, the irrational part of me put alcohol on the same line as cigarettes and things like that. Well, it's legal. It's not the problem. So if I quit these things, I'm still good societal because alcohol's legal. It's not an issue.
Exactly. And at the time I was still trying to save my career. Not that I was, going to be thrown out. I mean, I went through ASAP and I went through a lot of outpatient therapy at a hospital, not even on base. I actually went to a hospital in Southern Pines, North Carolina, and did my intensive outpatient there. And so I did realize since I had an addiction problem, maybe I should quit drinking. Like I had that thought. Okay. And so that was my first attempt at AA, and my first attempt at like really just, okay, I gotta fix this.
So you'd say this is your first time in your adult life. You tell yourself your internal conversation is, I have a drinking problem. I'm an alcoholic.
Yes, this is about that first time, and I was 24ish, 25, somewhere at 24.
And that was the desire to quit drinking, to change your life and not be an alcoholic? Or was it, oh man, I need to get this under control, maybe I'll drink again? What was your headspace at that time?
So definitely, it wasn't to quit permanently.
Right.
It was to get back to the way I was before I deployed, where I was just a weekend drinker.
Yeah, right. You would still want to be socially amped at it and stuff like that, because I know when I first started treatment, the military treatment side, when they sent me, I just wanted to get through it, to be able to go live my life and say I checked the box, and stuff like that. So that's why I was just wondering where your head was at there at that time.
Yeah, as well, and at this time too, I was also getting medically retired. Like that's when they started the medical retirement on me. Yeah. So I had the emotions of I got to get this under control because I know I'm going to be getting out, and I got to figure out what my next steps are. And I know to do that, I have to be clear-headed.
Right.
So I did the AA thing, and I say I did the AA thing because I did it kind of a la carte. I'd see step one, okay, yeah, I got a problem. Yeah. Not really, though. My life is still manageable.
Right. A common misconception, I think, for a lot of people that are new to the program, you don't have to lose everything in your life to be able to find recovery and live a happier life with serenity and peace. And I don't mean to interrupt Gunther here. I just think we both feel strongly about that. Unfortunately, our stories are a little different, as you'll learn, but you don't have to be at rock bottom, and you may be managing your business life and stuff like that and still have a raging problem that spiritually is defeating you. So I just wanted to kind of point that out.
And that's really kind of what was going on, like what you're explaining. Because I still needed other things in my life. So I quit drinking and I quit doing drugs. My back at this point has healed, but I can no longer do combat. So they're doing the medical retirement. Right. Well, I have to have something in my life. So this is where I discovered bull riding.
Okay. Yeah, that'll help the back.
Yeah, exactly. So I did that for a while, and that was a ton of fun. Yeah. Had a blast. It solved my adrenaline problem.
Exactly, and that's a big thing with veterans. I know you other veterans out there, especially combat veterans, surely know that there's not hardly anything, if anything, that'll ever come close to combat adrenaline. But I think we all secretly, especially after deployment, strive to meet that. It's another addiction in the brain, I think, a lot of the time for us.
Yes, and strapping your hand to a 2,000-pound animal, it definitely it did help fill that void for a little bit, right. Kind of until it didn't. I was right at 6 months, not drinking, hadn't touched a drug, life was on the up. My medical retirement had just came through. We're getting ready to move, and we go out with a bunch of my bull riding buddies, and I remember sitting there, and I'm drinking a soda. I can't remember which one. I'd like to say it was a diet something, but it probably wasn't. And my ex comes up to me, and she has my beer of choice, which is a PBR. Yeah. All of you can knock on it, but it's America's oldest, one of America's oldest breweries. Not the oldest, but one of. And she's like, she did the talk for me. I didn't even have to do it in my head of I can have one drink. She said it for me, and that was my justification. Okay, well, obviously, if she says it's okay, I can drink.
I got no one to hide from. I'm good to go.
So I had a beer, and I had another one. And I didn't have any more after that. So then my delusion really began, because it was, dude, you just had 2 beers and you left. Obviously, you're not an alcoholic. So I quit going to AA. Like, then. Never went back to another meeting.
Right. You're cured. You got it. You're back in control, so to speak.
Exactly. And the unfortunate thing is that 6 months that I was going to AA, I never really opened the book. I think I read, 2 or 3 things out of it, but I never really did the steps. I started working on like a 4th step, and that was right around the time that I picked up the drink again. So to me, it was cool. Now I don't have to do this 4th step, which right. I was petrified of at the time.
Avoidance is clearance.
Right. And then number 2, I'm allowed to drink. Obviously, like in my head, that's how I'm what I'm telling myself. This was in 2014, and we just moved back to St. Louis. My drinking stayed pretty well under control that first year out. I was focused on my career. I'd started out at a company called Trimco. Great company to work for. Traveled a lot, doing roofing and commercial roofing, and life was good. Making decent money. On the outside, everything was great. Internally, though, I'm screaming. Right. I'm still battling demons that I never really worked through. I'm keeping my drinking under control, but I'm smoking pot religiously, morning, noon, and night.
Right. So PTSD is ripping through.
Yes, nightmares are real. Multiple nights during the week, I'm sleeping on the couch because I'd have violent nightmares, and there's times I'd, be just swinging my arms, and I'd hit my ex-wife. There was times I've thrown her out of bed, and it was just safer for me to go to the couch.
Yeah, and it's not domestic violence, and as I said earlier, especially combat veterans, you can understand. I mean, you'll wake up flailing or something like that, or trying to run in your sleep or engage, and it's just, it's literally out of your control. So I don't want anybody to get things confused.
Right. None of it was ever intentional. You fast forward, we'd kind of moved a little bit more. We moved back to North Carolina. I went back to the church that we were going to. We had our son at this time. And while I was going to the church, we were very much Southern Baptist. I mean, we were at church every Wednesday, every Sunday morning, every Sunday evening. There was a church function, we were at it. Men's retreats we would do regularly. Kayaking different rivers. Again, keeping my drinking completely under control.
Oh, yeah, especially, and that's, I grew up in it. My dad was a pastor in it. Great man, nothing against that. But, the back row secret drinking Baptist is, you got to keep it on the DL.
Right, and I was keeping it very under control. It was just the weekends, and it was like a 6-pack. I would just get a buzz. Right. I didn't even need to get drunk at this time.
Okay.
Still hadn't touched a drug. I mean, other than pot, I hadn't touched a drug.
Yeah.
So life was good. We moved back to St. Louis again and went back to roofing. And again, life was on the up and up. Me and my ex-wife were doing very well. I was making really good money. We were getting ready to purchase a house. And again, on the outside, everything looked good, but it wasn't internally. I'm still battling so much. And I am very much one of those, I guess you want to call him the manly man that, because I grew up in a family where that's what you did. You bottled it up.
Yeah,
and then you picked up a bottle.
Status. Yeah.
And this is when when we left the church and we moved back to St. Louis. I mean, when I left the church, I was a deacon and everything. I mean, there was God, there was, Jesus and the whole 9 yards. And we moved back to St. Louis. We didn't go to church anymore.
Do you think, so you're a deacon, you're heavily involved. You guys are there 3 nights out of the week, it's half the week. Was that a earnest feeling, or do you think it was almost a facade to be a part of it? Not against your moral content, but like it felt right, so it was right, and that's where you said, or were you really into it? Was it really
mixture of both? Life was good because I was going to church. I wasn't drinking. I was praying regularly. Just doing what the American dream is, right. Being a father that I could provide for my family. My ex-wife, she didn't have to work. I provided, paid all the bills. We still had money left over. We didn't go out and party and things like that. So, like you said, I mean, it felt good, so it was good.
Right.
I believed at that time in God. I will say that. I did grow up, in a Christian household. My mom was raised Pentecostal. So God was a part of my family for sure, and a part of my life. But when we moved back and we quit going, my drinking started to increase, and it was for 2 reasons. One, I was back in my hometown where I had all my friends from high school, and number 2, my ex-wife enjoyed going out too.
Right.
So I mean, we were your typical bar couple. I mean, everybody in town knew who we were. And we got along with everybody. I mean, we would show up to the bars and I should have known that I had a drinking problem. I don't want to diagnose her, and I won't do that. But what I will say is it's pretty bad when you show up to the bar, and we would always go to we'd start out at 1. It was JV's in Waterloo. It's not there anymore. It's a different bar now. But we would show up there. They already knew that we were going to each have a salad. We were each going to have a set. We were going to share a thing of wings. And they already knew what her drink was, and they knew what I was drinking. And it would be, we would literally walk in. They wouldn't hand us menus, nothing. They would hand us our drinks, and our order would already be in.
So, you're high up on the patron list.
Exactly. And the other sad thing is when people would see us walk into a bar, they knew not to even play the jukebox because they knew I would override it.
DJ G.
Exactly. I wanted to hear my music.
That's right.
This is, again, coming into my alcoholism as we like to be the director.
Oh, yeah.
And so everybody was
in full control.
Exactly. So I was going to control the music. I was going to control the drinking. I was going to buy the shots for everybody. That's, that all falls into that alcoholism that people don't, I think they don't realize.
Right.
They just think that, it's just the drinking. It's everything.
Right. And as we're going, these pieces are all falling into place with your story, and I'm learning and seeing where we're evolving to.
Yes. And so we bought the house. We had the fifth wheel camper. I had a Chevy 3500. I had my Dodge Ram 1500. Our house, was a 2,500 square foot in the suburbs. We were living, one of the safest communities in the entire state of Illinois. The school district's top 5 in the state of Illinois for public schools.
Right.
Again,
literally the American dream.
Exactly. And I'm not going to blame. So going into the part where my alcoholism really just took off and my drug addiction, right when we bought the house, I had been right at about 8-9 years without touching a hard drug. I mean, if I was in pain, I took Tylenol. There were times where I definitely should have taken something more than Tylenol, but I wouldn't do it because I was so afraid of my addiction from the Army.
Yeah, for sure.
Never mind the fact at this point in my life, I'm starting to buy a 12-pack every day.
Right.
When I would travel out of town, I knew where to go and buy the beer that I wanted, which was PBR.
Right, so now you've got mapped out stops.
Exactly.
For your drinking. You're planning around your drinking.
Yes, it's still traveling a lot for work. About 60 to 70% of my time I was away from the house. And I actually remember one time I was in Arkansas for 6 weeks, and it was a dry county.
Oh, boy.
I had to drive 45 minutes to go and get beer.
Yeah, and that's unacceptable.
It was.
I mean, and you don't have DoorDash back then, so.
No, and even if you did, I wasn't paying those prices. I mean, I liked liquor, but right. I could go and pick it up.
Right.
So, like I said, right around the time we bought the house, I was at a party one night, and they busted out some Coke, and I was like, you know what, I haven't done that in a while, and I don't know what made me really want to do it, other than the fact that I just wanted to try it again.
And you're in the atmosphere, it's going, you know the effects, so there's no real anxiety.
No. And the sad thing is, in my town, and nobody will admit it in that town, this is the funny thing, is like when you make it and you have like a status about you, and you live the life that I live, all of those people did Coke.
Oh,
it was
the underlying society.
Exactly. I mean, I had neighbors that were like, well, how do you know this person? I was like, well, how do you know this person? And we all knew.
Lipstick on a pig. It's as I said, it's a facade for sure. And I've ran into that too. Wow.
So there wasn't even a stigma around doing Coke. I mean, I had made it, and I'm in this, class of people, and it's acceptable.
Yeah, just unspoken.
So did that, and then a couple weeks later, we did a guys' weekend trip, and that's when we all took our campers out. It was just us guys having a great time, and me and some buddies went in, and we got, I don't remember how much blow we got, but we bought enough to last for 3 days.
Right.
So we thought.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And did that all weekend long, heavy drinking. Coming back from that trip, my ex-wife was now pregnant with our 3rd child. And we just bought the house. Pressure was really starting to get on to me as far as, 3 kids now.
Right.
And now I've developed this habit that I didn't even realize I developed because I'd kept it to the weekends.
Right, but on top of, I've got 2 kids and a wife to feed right now. She's under stress. We have another kid on the way. Got to manage my job and all this. But unconsciously in the back of your head, you're also planning, I need to get a bag of this. I need to get my booze. So it's a part of your routine.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't want to blame this, but then COVID happened.
Right.
And luckily for me, since I worked outdoors on roofs, we only missed like a week of work. And that was just so that way they could figure out what our next steps were whenever the lockdown.
Legalities and all of it.
Right. When the shutdown or the lockdown, whatever you wanted to call it.
Right. Yeah.
And unfortunately, unfortunately, at that time, my third daughter had been born, and my ex-wife had a huge mental break, unfortunately. And it led to a lot of fighting, led to me drinking a lot more to deal with that side of things. And, you know, I stuck by her side through this because she had stuck by me through so much at this point. And I felt like I owed that. Also at this time, though, I was becoming very unhappy in my marriage. And it wasn't, I can't even really blame her. It's not like really anything that she did. It was me that was just unhappy with my life. Loved my kids, loved you know, the outside look of my life.
No doubt.
Just was not happy. And started over the next couple years after COVID, I was drinking daily. And there was no more weekending it. There was no more going a day without alcohol. It was every day I was getting off work, buying a 12-pack.
Your new career.
Yes.
Yeah.
Switched jobs a couple times during this because I couldn't travel anymore because I can't have my ex-wife sitting at home with 3 kids and she can't, there's nothing she can do, and that's not fair to her.
Right.
So I take a job where I go local. I actually go in carpentry. Did that for a while, and then one of my friends got me on where he worked at a great company, Trost Plastics, and they did vinyl decking and vinyl fencing, and I got put on their deck crew. About a year after working for them, everything came to a head with me and my ex-wife. Like May 2022. My drinking was out of control. My addiction to coke was very out of control. I wasn't the only one in the marriage that was having issues with this either, though. I mean, we would fight each other, and the sad thing is, we would fight each other. Like if she got a bag, I'd be mad because she didn't tell me about it. The same reason, like if I got one, she'd be mad because I didn't tell her about it.
Right. So this is both of you are involved in this, and I mean, I guess it's safe for assumption we've got a lot of finances going to these habits.
Yes, and then started getting behind on other bills. Because
now it's superseding the necessities.
So, and I'll never forget, it was May 19th, 2022. I left. We got into a big blowout fight. I had enough. I left. And there was a couple reasons why I left. At this point, I was done. I didn't want to be married anymore. I knew there was something wrong with me, but I kept blaming PTSD. And, you know, I got, you know, my mother telling me I need to sober up and all this stuff. And you know, the divorce, just like that set me over the edge. We fought hard. And in doing so, I mean, the kids were involved. There were supervised visits on my end. My drinking went from a 12-pack to a 5th of Fireball every day after work. And if I was done with that, I'd go back to the gas station and get more.
Right. So we're not, and I know exactly where you're at from my past, but so we're at this point where I bought this much alcohol for tonight. That'll be fine. Now we get through that much alcohol. We got to keep going. We're not going to stop.
Right. I was getting to a point to where I was getting off work at 3:30, 4 o'clock and drinking until 9, 10 o'clock at night until I finally passed out.
Right. So we're not actually naturally going to sleep anymore. We're drinking till we're just tired, so to speak, and passing out.
And at this time, because of everything that was going on with, you know, the divorce, I did quit drugs, but I was still, I mean, my drinking was through the roof. So much so that I ended up in the hospital multiple times for pancreatitis.
Yeah, terrible.
And I don't wish that upon really anybody. That is an incredible amount of pain.
Brutal pain.
About every 4 to 6 months, I'd find myself in the hospital for pancreatitis. And each time I would get out, I would tell myself, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. And
oh, yeah, the old toilet prayer, or in this case, the hospital prayer of, I'm done. I'm not going to do it again.
Right. And one of the times I went to the hospital, it was actually like my chest was pounding, and I'd started doing blow again because I got my kids back, but now at this time I don't have them again. So, you know, we're getting towards the tail end of my career here. And one of the times I went to the hospital, my chest was pounding, my stomach was on fire, which I knew was the pancreatitis. I get to the hospital, and before the blood work comes back, you know, they do the CT scan and they check, or I don't know, CT scan or a CAT scan, whatever scan they do to see if my pancreas was inflamed, and it was. I didn't tell them what all I had done that day. They could sense that I was drunk, obviously. Right. But the amount of pain that I was in, well, they gave me a shot of fentanyl and my heart stopped. And this was one of the few times my mom didn't take me to the hospital, and I'm forever grateful that she didn't have to see her son pretty much die right there.
Right. I mean, he did, so.
And resuscitated me, and this was the second to the last time I was in the hospital, and I told myself this was the last time I was in the hospital. Sorry, I correct that. That was the last time.
Extremely traumatic, man. I mean, they don't know what you got in there. You're trying to hold back some information. They try to give you life-saving measures, or at least to get you out of pain, because with that pain from pancreatitis, your blood pressure's going up, everything. It's really hard on your body, knowing from experience. So they hit you with the fentanyl and dead.
Right, and at this time, they had given me fentanyl before my first time in the hospital for pancreatitis. They gave me fentanyl, so it wasn't even like my body reacted to it in a bad way. What happened? I just had so much stuff in my body.
Literally overdosed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I was in the hospital for about 4 or 5 days that time. I literally left that hospital, drove straight to the gas station, and got a sleeve of shooters. Those little 1 or 2 ounce shooters. Yeah. Was drinking on the way home that day.
Yeah.
Just after getting out of the hospital from dying.
That's the disease, and that's the sickness. Is at this point, we're full blown here. You're using all the time, even in sickness, and you tell yourself in an instant, I'm not going to drink, I'm done. And as you're saying that, you're literally purchasing alcohol.
Yes.
So we're full blown in the disease now, and this is where it's not just mental, it's not just physical, it's that combo that really starts to bring us down, I think, and I think that's where we're headed.
Right. So about 4 months go by, about 4 to 6 months go by after that, 4 or 5, somewhere in there. In the meantime, I had got myself a nifty little coke charge. Luckily, it was small enough to where, they're dropping it. I just got to do the 6 months probation. So, I mean, it's a big deal, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah, that free set of government bracelets.
Exactly. I'm drinking morning, noon, and night after that charge, and that was in March of this year. And every single day, I wake up, go to the gas station, buy shooters, or get Baileys to put in my coffee.
The hair of the dog, for sure. Emotionally, at this point, we're hair of the dog, and I mean, we're 24 hours engaged and staying messed up.
Absolutely. And at this time, Amy, my girlfriend, she was going through breast cancer, and all that was going on, and one of her surgeries was coming up, and so I'm just completely, almost ruining this woman's life, who for some reason loved me.
Right.
I'm just this tornado at this point. There's no stopping me.
Right.
Get that charge, and like I said, morning, noon, and night drinking. And
what's your internal conflict right now going on? So this stage in your life, you've obviously got the outside pressures of life. You've got the full blown addiction, and you got your girlfriend with breast cancer, stuff like that. So there's those pressures, but internally, we've got the PTSD here. What's the internal conflict look like?
A lot of it was just not being able to see my kids.
Yeah,
absolutely. That was a lot of it. Well, that's what I blamed it on.
Right. Still detrimental, but yeah.
I had that going on. I had just life in general, and I didn't want to live anymore. Right. So I was actively there were days I was actively doing enough blow to where it should have blown out an elephant's heart. Right. And for some reason, I'm still here. Yeah. I was drinking so much that it would kill almost any average person. And again, yeah. I'm still trucking along.
Right.
I would find myself going to sleep at night in my camper because I wouldn't go to Amy's, or I wouldn't go to my mom's, and I would stay in my camper, which my camper was parked where I worked, so it worked out even better. I could get off work, go right over to my camper.
Right.
And also during lunch, I could go and drink.
Off to the races. Now you got a fort.
Exactly. And there was multiple nights I'd go to sleep in my camper, and I would wake up from a blackout, and I would have my pistol in my hand. Mm-hmm. Or it'd be on the nightstand. So somewhere in my blackout, I guess I'd worked up the courage to at least grab the gun, but never went through with it.
Right.
One of the guys I worked with, always had blow and never had a problem giving me some. So every day during lunch, I'm breaking out lines, and this is my life now. I mean, I'm working a job that I do enjoy, but I'm miserable. Like at this point, I'm not even miserable because of PTSD or because I don't have my kids or any number of reasons you would think I would be miserable. I wasn't. At this point, I was just miserable because I couldn't break this cycle.
Right. So now nothing matters, but everything matters. It's hard to explain or say really in words, but so all these problems exist, they're there, but you can't even give them the time of day because you have to stay focused at this point on staying some sort of high, because otherwise you're sick, you're miserable.
Absolutely.
So it's just a dedication to getting messed up.
And that's what my life was at this point. It was, I was living to die. Right. I would go to bed every night begging, which at this point in time, I didn't even believe in God. Okay. Like, I was full-blown atheist at this point. If there was a God, I wanted nothing to do with it.
Right, he's not helping me down here. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm praying to something I don't even believe in, to not wake up in the morning, and then getting up in the morning and being pissed off at that same thing because I woke up.
Right.
And again, this cycle would just start again. And
No satisfaction.
What broke my cycle finally, which is the part of my story that I'm finally excited to get to, because everything leading up to this point, it's the third time you're going to hear me say it, none of that made me an alcoholic and addict. Right. I was born this way. I have an allergy.
Yeah, and a lot of times what we're doing here, especially on our program, is we want to go through the entire story. We want to be able to relate and let the listeners know out there, no matter what you've been through or done, someone's done more, someone's done worse, so it's not about that. And what we're getting to next is going to be the success story. Looking for professional printing and design services? KT Print and Design, located at 1323 West Roosevelt Boulevard in Monroe, delivers exceptional quality for all your business needs. From eye-catching business cards and brochures to large format banners and custom signage, the expert team brings your vision to life. KT Print and Design combines cutting-edge technology with creative expertise to ensure stunning results every time. With fast turnaround time and competitive pricing, they make it easy to get the printed materials every business deserves. The dedicated staff works closely with you to understand your goals and deliver solutions exceeding your expectations. Visit KT Print and Design today on Facebook or call 704-635-8292 and discover why local businesses have trusted them for over 7 years as their printing partner. Whether you need promotional materials, corporate stationery, trade show displays, or blueprints, KT Print and Design makes your business stand out. Contact them now for free consultations and quotes. Call 704-635-8292. KT Print and Design. Welcome back. We are here with my buddy Gunther, going through his life story. We've made quite a bit along the way here where we're at, and it's gotten pretty rough and dark right now, and we're going to keep going. Gunther?
Thank you. So I would definitely say at this point in time, I'm at my all-time low. I've gotten a DUI at this point. I don't get to see my kids. I've got the coke charge. I've got almost no friends left. And I am literally living just to drink and do drugs. Coming up, and this is the part of the story where I want to emphasize too, if it's okay, is that I was that typical veteran and typical alcoholic. This goes out to both, especially if you're one and the same, is right. I felt nobody got me. Nobody knew how to help me. Mm-hmm. I felt like I had nowhere to go. And the sad thing, there's tons of programs out there for veterans. There's tons of programs out there for people who are not veterans that are alcoholics and addicts. But in my head, nobody got it. Nobody understood.
No, I'm with you. I felt the same way. The programs kind of seem superficial. You're so used to death by PowerPoint and other things in the Army, you think it's just a generic language, and nobody really gets it. So,
right. So this is the part where, like, I really hope I reach anybody with this story. Is I remember the day when I decided to finally get sober, when I'm at the end of my road, and it was because I was driving back from my dad's house, and I'm crossing Wren Lake. There's two bridges. There's one that's short and there's one that's long. And when I hit the second part, I was doing roughly 90, 95 miles an hour, and I was going to drive it off into the water. And it wasn't a high bridge. I mean, it's only like 10, 15 feet above the water, but I mean, you're doing 95 miles an hour, and I didn't have my seatbelt on.
Right. So we're waking up from blackouts with guns in our hands, and not just from PTSD dreams, from self-inflicting injuries, wanting to, and now we're premeditating our own death.
Yes, and I'm flying down the road, and I see the spot where I'm going to drive off. It's a real nice clearing, and I'm like, I'm doing it. And I look over, and I have my dog with me. Mm. And my thought was, well, he doesn't deserve this. He didn't do anything wrong. He's just stuck with me today.
Yeah.
And I immediately pull the car over. I break down, and I call my mom, and I said, I want to go to rehab. And she obviously, she starts crying too. And this is about mid-July, towards the end of July this year. And
she's crying because she's brokenhearted for you, but she's also probably got that mother's sense of relief that finally my boy will get some help. And
that's yes, very much so. Because had I not went and got help, I mean, she would have been burying me by this time this year.
Right.
I was headed down that road, obviously.
The disease will kill you. For sure.
Yes. And the sad thing about this disease is it's going to try to kill you, but it'll settle for miserable.
Right.
And so broke down, I called her, and she wanted me to go somewhere local in St. Louis. And my thought was, no, I'm not staying local. I got to get away from all of this. And so I had her just get out her iPad and Google rehab center in Florida, and Beach House Recovery pulled up, and I called them. They took all my information and called me back within like 15 minutes, and I was approved insurance-wise. They wanted me to leave the next day, and I couldn't. And it wasn't because really wasn't because of my alcoholic brain that I couldn't leave right away. Amy was having reconstructive surgery, so I wanted to stay for that. And so she had her surgery, and I flew out, I think, 3 or 4 days after that. I think 4. I stayed around long enough for her to be home for a couple days after her surgery, and then I left.
Right. That's understandable with all that.
Right.
You guys went through with the cancer and stuff like that.
And got on the plane. So starting out going to rehab. So that the day before I left, I was going to my job, locking up my toolboxes, and I get pulled over. I had a warrant that I didn't know about.
Oh, there's that.
So it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm getting arrested the day before leaving for rehab.
Right. Just another little cattle prod to you.
Exactly. Get to jail that morning, and I'm begging. I'm like, look, I live in a small county, so I know the docket's not full, and the judge could see me if he wanted to.
Right.
So I'm begging the deputies and stuff to let me go and get in front of the judge today. And the one just being a royal prick. Oh, you know how many times I hear I don't have a warrant, or I didn't know this, and it was like I really honestly didn't. And luckily, the deputy that arrested me, he got me in that morning, and by 9:30, I was in front of the judge. And this is how defiant I am. The judge says, because it's a no bond state, so I was going to be released anyways the next day, but I would have missed my plane. And if I'd have missed my plane, I knew I wasn't going to go. That would have been like a sign to me not to get help, or it would have at least been a justification in my head.
Right.
And the judge, he's like, all right, well, I'm going to release you, but you can't do drugs, you can't drink, can't do this, and you have to report to rehab. And I was like, you got to take that out. And he's like, what? I was like, if you put that I have to go to rehab, you might as well take me back to jail. I won't go. I have to do this on my own. And he blacked it out. But that's how defiant I still am at this point. I want the help. I have the plane ticket. But now because you told me I have to go, I won't go.
Right. Yeah.
So he takes it out of there. And I get everything packed up that night. And next morning, I go to the gas station. I'm like, all right, here I go. Of course, I walk in. I buy a sleeve of shooters.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, why not? I'm going to rehab.
That's what you know, right? Oh, yeah, one final hoorah, why not? Not even thinking it could kill us, but right.
Right. So I pull out of the gas station. Well, when I pull out of the gas station, a cop's behind me, and I'm like, all right,
Whoop.
I'm not going to take a shot of alcohol with the cop driving behind me.
But I want to.
Right. So I tell myself when I cross the bridge into Missouri on my way to my mom's house, that's when I'll have one. As soon as I cross the bridge, there's a local cop on the other side of the bridge. He starts to follow me. So I was like, all right, when I get on 55 South, I'll take my shot then. I'll start taking my shots then, because at this point I'm getting close to Mom's house, and it's like I got to get these shots in before I get there, because she's not going to let me drink.
Yeah, there's that, right?
So I get on 55 South. Missouri State Trooper follows me all the way to my mom's exit.
Sensing a pattern here, Gunther.
Yeah, this is 3 cops now that have been following me, and it's like, okay, so I pull off on my mom's exit, and I'm like, I don't know, 5 minutes from her house, and I go to grab it because it's like, all right, now's my chance to go ahead and slam like 3 or 4 of these. Oh, guess what pops up behind me, dude? And I am not even kidding. A 4th cop follows me to my mom's subdivision. Yeah, exactly. Get to my mom's house, angry because I couldn't drink.
Right.
Couldn't do anything that morning. So my sobriety date is July 31st of 2025, or 2024, sorry. July 31st of 2024.
Right.
And it wasn't by choice.
Yeah. Thank you to all the officers out there that day.
Yeah, exactly. And I get on the plane, I fly down here, and all the while I'm also, I should reiterate this, or at least let this be known.
Right.
I was coming to rehab in hopes that they were going to just teach me how to control my drinking.
Right. Social drinking.
Yeah, and that's not what they did. They told me day one I couldn't drink anymore.
Right. Yeah, so, we have, what you're realizing as you come in, but at this point, we're way past the social aspect being a feasible achievement now in life.
Exactly. And so you get to rehab, they did the little drug test on me. They're like, is there anything in your system? And I was like, yeah, there's going to be coke and there's going to be, like pain pills, just so that way, because that's what I used to use to go to sleep whenever I would do too much blow.
Right. You have a toolkit, or should I say arsenal of self-destruction now. I know for me too, when I was in the pits of it, was I would be so high on one thing, I'd have to use the other thing to come off of that high. So now I've got multiple drugs to even function to be high. And then, of course, the sustaining element always was alcohol.
Right. Mine was perk 30s to go to sleep.
Right.
So they do the drug test, and that thing was positive pretty much for everything except for Suboxone.
Yeah, I heard your cup melted.
Yeah, almost. And I was shocked because there was fentanyl in my system. There was meth. I was like, that's impossible. I don't do that stuff.
Nothing's pure anymore, that fentanyl thing.
Right. Only time I'd done fentanyl was twice in the hospital. I have experimented with... Right. The only time I had done meth was maybe once or twice. I never did it. It wasn't my thing.
Right.
So come to find out, the guy I'm getting blow from work, it's cut with everything under the sun.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky to be alive.
Right. You got a cocktail of drugs going in, and that's dangerous. Definitely dangerous.
So they immediately, they start the Ativan, the Keppra, and I'm shaking at this point. The shakes are in full. Yes. But I'm not like dope sick or like, I don't have that detox yet. It's just the alcohol at this point. And about the middle of the night, I ended up having a massive seizure. My first night in rehab, and I ended up going to the emergency room by ambulance. Mm-hmm. And I immediately was like, okay, these guys don't know what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. They told me if I took the Keppra, I wouldn't have a seizure and all this other stuff. And I ended up being released from the hospital. They picked me back up, took me back to the rehab center. And throughout the next 24 hours, I had 4 more seizures. Mind you, still on the Keppra and the Ativan. Day 2, I said I wanted to come off the Ativan. I didn't care about the Keppra. I'll keep taking that if I have to, because it's not working in my mind. But according to the doctor, they could have been a whole lot worse seizures.
Right.
It came off the Ativan, and I did the hard detox for like the next 3 days. And it was, 23 hours in bed. I couldn't get up.
Severe depression.
Yes, and I mean just sweating, my temperature going up and down, throwing up nonstop. I couldn't keep anything down. It was an absolute miserable 3 days of detox, almost 4. About day 4 or 5, I finally was moved from detox to residential, and I wasn't clear-headed by any means, but I wasn't sick anymore. I could finally eat. I could finally walk.
Right, we're making some...
Right. I could talk.
Physical progress.
I could talk to people. And at this time, my blood sugars are so out of control because I haven't been taking care of myself. I'm taking, 40 units of short-acting insulin before each meal, sometimes upwards of 50 units.
Right, because on top of this, you got the pancreatitis and the addiction and things like that. You're also diabetic.
Yes.
So that's, really we're playing with death here.
100%. And so, 50, sometimes upwards of 50 units before each meal of the short acting 3 times a day. And then my long acting, I was doing 40 units in the morning, 50 units at night. By about week 2 in rehab, I was finally getting clear-headed. I was going to the AA meetings every night. And I really realized at this point that I had a problem, that I could not drink anymore. I'd heard enough stories in the AA room. And that's also where I met my sponsor. And it was something he said that triggered. He said, look around this room. You have nothing left to lose. You are in rehab. You are at your bottom. And if this isn't your bottom, I don't want to see what it is.
Right.
Well, for me, this was my bottom. So I opened the big book for the first time and started reading it. I was starting to go to the gym regularly at this time at rehab. I was going like 3 times a day. I was running upwards of 4 and 5 miles a day. This is all within like 2 weeks. Like, this is how much my health has changed. And it changed so much that I was down at this point to about 20 units before each meal of insulin. My long acting, they had shortened to 20 units in the morning, 20 units in the evening. My pancreas wasn't hurting. My body was feeling better. Everything was finally starting to come together. Towards the end of me getting out of rehab, about close to day 30, I got the sponsor, because that's what they said to do. Mm-hmm. And when I left rehab, I was at 6 units before each meal and only 15 units of my long acting in the morning and in the evening. So my body was actively healing at this point.
Right, and we've got some before and after pictures we'll post with this broadcast, but what are you weighing? you're coming in here, you're sick as hell, man. And right now I'm looking at a guy who's physically fit and building every day. But then when you came in, I know from what I've seen, I mean, you were just skin and bones, man. You were sick.
Yeah, I'm 6 foot and I weighed 161 pounds when I went into rehab.
Yeah, that's not healthy.
You can see just about every bone in my body.
Right. Yeah, I know you could.
And today I'm 209 pounds and I can lift more than a pencil.
Right. 50-pound increase there. And with your permission, we'll put some pictures up.
Absolutely. So once I started working with my sponsor, mind you, at this point, I'm not the atheist anymore. I'm agnostic. And if people don't know the difference, I'll explain it. Atheist, there's absolutely nothing beyond the here and now. Mm-hmm. Agnostic is there might be something, but they don't know.
So your spiritual doorbell's starting to ring a little bit.
Things are changing. And going into working in the steps with my sponsor, he said, "Are you willing to believe in a power greater than yourself?" And because I wasn't spiritually ready yet, I just had to have the willingness. And that's all it says in the big book, by the way. You just have to have the willingness. But I was, okay, fine, a power greater than myself. Physics tells us our body has so much energy. The sun has a lot more energy than my body. Therefore, the sun and the sky was my higher power. Right. And that worked for a little bit. And then I found myself starting to pray regularly and getting through the steps. I got through my 4th step. I did my 5th step. I'm starting to have that bright light experience that they talk about. And while I'm doing all of this, other great things are happening in my life. I'm at a great recovery center, Palm Beach Gardens Recovery. And shortly after arriving there, I don't know if it's that they saw something in me or saw like I had some sort of potential, but about a month after being there, I became the house manager, and then they got a second house, started running both houses, and I got through all of my steps. And after going through these steps, they say, you're going to be, thrown into the 4th dimension. You're going to have this happen. You're going to have all these great things. Well, here's the things that are great that have happened to me. I now believe that there is a God. Do I believe that it's the Christian God that I once believed in? No.
And that's a God of your understanding.
Right. And for me, just praying daily has helped a lot. And I do it throughout the day. I do even just little prayers of just thank you, God.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's key.
Making sure that I take my daily inventory, all that, doing all of these steps. I mean, I was so scared to go into each and every one of these, and then I finally got to a point to where it was, okay, well, I believe there's a power greater than me. Okay, I got to write out everything that ticked me off.
Yeah, I know. I watched you. We actually lived together at these houses. Saw you go. I won't say struggling because it's a growth thing, but going through your 4th step, writing for hours and taking a mental break and walking around and the days on it. And for everybody, it's different. The steps in general. Even though there's a guideline, it's different for everybody on timelines, but, I watched you really go into this, and so I know that step was huge.
Yeah, and it was, and I'm glad I did it, because there was some things that I was going to take to my grave. There was things that I just could not speak about that were relating to the military, and again, I prayed on it, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to write it out. I did it, and then I did my 5th step, where you go everything through your 4th step, and you admit where you were wrong, and you kind of start building your amends list at this point too. And so I did my 5th step, and I got to the last few things, and I remember I broke down crying in front of my sponsor. And if anybody ever were to meet my sponsor, like, that is not the man that I ever thought I'd cry in front of. I mean, he's 6'8", and he's just a monster of a man. But that man led me to spirituality. I mean, having that moment, and my 5th step took 5.5, almost 6 hours. And he just sat there and listened. I mean, no judgment, nothing.
The way it should be.
Exactly. My perfect sponsor, for sure. Is he for everybody? I have no idea, but I can tell you right now, I had no judgment from the man. And when we were done, he was like, okay, now let's do 6 and 7. Now you go doing 6 and 7. So I did that. Sure. Then I made my list. And again, while all this is going on, they get the second house at the recovery center, and things start to really change in my life. I was given some great opportunities by the owner and by the director. They are incredible people. I will forever be grateful for those two my entire life, because even though I got sober in Beach House, what's kept me sober are the opportunities and their belief in me.
Right.
And I would like to think I do a pretty good job as a house manager.
For sure. But also what I'm picking up on this, a lot of good stuff going on here, but now free from the chains of the addiction and substance abuse. Now we have life happening, good things are happening, but not only that, we have different things happening at the same time. So it's not as much as a a scared juggle. Now we are progressing, but able to handle things as they come our way and handle multiple tasks at different times instead of, the come apart with substance abuse.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's just the turnaround in my life in just these 4.5, almost 5 months now have been incredible. And I wouldn't trade these 4.5 months for any of the days that I had before.
Right.
At all. I mean, I had great times drinking. I'm not going to lie. I had great times at the bar.
Taking away the reality of stuff.
Exactly. But I wouldn't trade those best days for these worst days that I've had in sobriety.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I've still faced court. I've still faced judges. And now I go in there and I'm not as scared as I once was because I know, one, I'm doing the right thing.
Right.
And, whatever punishment comes my way. But luckily, like I said, blessings have happened. The coke charge getting dropped, only having to do 6 months probation.
Huge.
Getting, a new lawyer for other things that are going on in my life. It was a blessing. This guy is not only a 20-year veteran, but he's a Yale graduate and went to Georgetown for his law degree.
I know what he's doing.
So these blessings just keep coming, and my spirituality keeps growing, and a lot of that came, like I said, from my sponsor. And then one of the craziest things happened. Somebody came and asked me to be their sponsor, and I couldn't believe it.
Right.
Here I am.
It's huge, right?
Right. Here I am, 3.5, right at 4 months sober, and about 3.5 months. And I have somebody asking me to be their sponsor, not only be their sponsor, but take them through the work again. And I didn't know what they meant at the time, but then I find out this guy has almost 2 years sobriety.
Right.
And wants me to take him through the steps again
As
and
your
sponsor.
First sponsor.
Yeah.
Right? So this is, but again, odd or God moment. That's a cool thing because this is only going to feed you both with positive things. I want to backtrack real quick though, and not in too much detail or uncomfortableness, but how was the amends part? How was going? Because a lot of people are afraid to face that and stuff like that. And just like, how did that work for you?
So I still have people on my amends list. That's going to take me a little bit to clean up, obviously.
Sure.
But
and there's things we'll think about later in life and things like that. So
my first amends, it went really well. All of them actually thus far went really well. Went into it scared, but what helped was calling my sponsor before doing the amends. And I didn't do it on every amends. I did it on like my first 3 or 4. And doing the set-aside prayer with them. And that helped a lot. So that, you go in there with this mind and then surround the person with peace and, love and understanding.
Right.
And you just lay it out. Look, here's what I did. I'm sorry. What can I do to make it up? And then that's it. You're going to get one of 2 responses. You're going to get, oh, thank you for doing this. Here's what you can do to make it up. Or you're going to get the big middle finger and they're going to tell you to go F yourself.
Right. And you got to be prepared for either of those. But it's always one of my joys to listen to when I'm listening to other addicts, go through their success stories is that not knowing and the fear of going to do it, but committing to do it, and then it turns out such a positive outcome a lot of times.
And so far, all of mine have. Now, with that being said, I still got to make an amends to my ex-wife, and she's not ready to sit down with me, and that's okay.
Right.
I was a tornado in her life.
For sure.
One of the coolest amends I did was to a police officer, the one that actually arrested me the day before rehab. I went to him, and I shook his hand, and I told him, thank you for saving my life, because that's essentially what he did when he got me in front of the judge that day.
Yeah.
And I made my amends to him, but also for like the police department as a whole, because I was a tornado in my town. A lot of cops knew me, and his amends to that I could do for him was anytime I'm in town and I see a cop in uniform, shake their hand and tell them thank you. That's an easy amends.
Yeah.
And I'll be doing that the rest of my life that I go back home.
Right.
But
not a bad thing.
No, not at all. One of my amends was just fix things around her house. I did that. I did my amends to my mother, and her for me to do an amends was, help a single mother out in some way. I still haven't done that. I'm working on that, but it's kind of hard just to walk into a room and be like, hey, who's the single mother that needs help?
Right.
Raise your hand.
It might be perceived a little off at first,
right.
But I think that time will present itself.
So working towards these, and I feel so much better after each and every one. Like, personally, I feel better.
Yeah, and that's a gift that's, part of the deal. That's not really why you're doing it, but it's, a reward of doing it.
Right. And, just going back to the blessings, I mean, the director of Palm Beach Gardens Recovery and the owner, I mean, they have provided incredible opportunities for me and have been incredibly supportive. They have no judgment on me. They are constantly guiding me. Because there's times I've messed up as a house manager. I said things I shouldn't have said, or I've, made a mistake here and there. And I mean, with grace, love, and understanding, they're like, here's how you fix it. Well, at least with one of them. The other one's more of, he's got the tough love, but he means well and he cares. So
yeah, takes all kinds.
And then today, as I sit here doing this, I'm sober. I'm happy about being sober.
Right. There's happiness in sobriety. You can have a fun life. I think that's a misconception too.
Exactly.
We're not all fuddy duds. We still have a good time.
Right. Every Sunday for both houses, I cook and bring everybody together. Mm-hmm. We just did a game night in our house.
Oh, phase 10. I'm learning.
Phase 10 and pizza night. Had a blast. I mean, true gut laughs and crying, laughing, and not a one of us were under the influence of anything.
Not a bit. It's an amazing to even think that it's possible, man.
Absolutely.
And you've chaired some meetings already, and you just did your testimony, as I call it, your AA success story. You just did it for Beach House, where you were, and for addicts coming through, trying to get help. And so you're already giving back in many ways. You're doing the services. It's your program's alive and working. It's beautiful.
Absolutely. I mean, I am responsible for carrying this message now, being on the 12th step, and with that too is the service work. That's part of the responsibility. And yeah, I mean, I'm working a solid program, and I have to, because for me, there is this notion, and it's true. I mean, people can always go out and then come back into those rooms, and you'll be welcomed with open arms every time. But in my head, there's no going back out. If I go back out, I'm going to die.
Right. And I think that's, for a lot of us, that's where it is. But there's like you said, doors always open. Sometimes things happen. It doesn't have to be a part of your recovery to relapse. I know I struggled somewhere there, but to know that death is the ultimate gift from addiction, I know for us, we're definitely choosing the other route.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
And, I want to reiterate that you've worked these steps to the T and followed the guideline. And for any doubters, as cheesy as it is, if you work it, it works. But you have to do the work exactly the way it says, or it may not work. And you can't blame it on that. You have to follow through with every steps and what your sponsor says, and let go of the will. And I think that's exactly what my friend Gunther here has done. And it's a beautiful story, man. It's beautiful to watch. It's an honor to be your friend, man.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate that. And again, thank you for allowing me to share my story. And, to anybody out there that doubts the program, don't. I mean, it's not hard. I was asked last night what was the hardest step in the 12 steps, and I said not a single one of them. Right. I mean, I guess if you had to pick one, it's just admitting that you got a problem. So I guess step one would be the hardest. But then after that, I mean, so you do some writing, you do some talking, you do some praying, and then you start doing work.
Right.
And that's it. And don't hold anything back, because if you hold on to anything, you will go back out and drink.
Yeah. Resentment is deadly. I just think the spiritual, the physical, and the mental freedom that I've seen you gain is something to be cherished, and I think others should envy that and want that, and that's part of the 12th step there, sharing that message.
I greatly appreciate that. And again, thank you for having me on here, and thank you for allowing me to share my story.
Absolutely. And if you're out there listening, let us know what you thought. It's our first one, so don't be too hard on us. But definitely sign up and let us know if you'd be interested in more episodes, or if you want information on anything. If you're struggling, if you have a family member struggling, we have programs that we can get you in touch with. We're a part of a great program here in West Palm Beach, Florida. It's Palm Beach Gardens Recovery. And if you need any information, we will get that to you. You can email us, and we will put that information out at a later date. But we want to thank you for joining us here. Hey guys, I want to borrow a few seconds of your time to introduce Palm Beach Gardens Recovery. Located at 860 U.S. Highway 1 in North Palm Beach, Florida, Palm Beach Gardens Recovery provides clients with addiction and mental health treatment, equips them with the essential tools for success, and instills hope for them to become productive contributors to society through the development of crucial life skills. You can reach them at 561-823-6573 or email them at admissions@pbgardensrecovery.com. Again, that's admissions at pbgardensrecovery.com. If you have a coworker, family member, friend, anyone in need, please give them this information, and we will reach out to try to help them if they don't reach us first. Palm Beach Gardens Recovery doesn't just treat addiction. They transform lives. They dive into a personalized healing journey that restores well-being and renews hope and rebuilds families. So call again today at 561-823-6573. Palm Beach Gardens Recovery, the Center for Healing.